Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fireside Chat celebrating Women's History Month. So, today we're speaking with two top notch CPAs, and you'll get to meet them in a minute. First, I am Orumé Hayes, founder and managing director of Hayes CPA, a New York City certified and minority owned business. I'm also vice president of the New York State Society of CPAs, and I am chair of AICPA's Private Companies Practice Section Executive Committee. So, a little bit of fun fact about myself. I enjoy running, and in 2010, I completed the 2010 New York City Marathon. So now I don't know what I was thinking about, but I actually signed up recently for the Brooklyn Half Marathon. It's taking place at the end of the month, next month. So I have a lot of training to catch up with. So now let's get to meet our panelists. Um, Kecia Williams Smith, and Lynn Fuentes. Thank you both for being here. So first, let's go to Lynn for an introduction.
Thank you, Orumé. My name is Lynn Fuentes. I am a managing partner of Fuentes and Angel CPAs out on Long Island, New York. I'm also the president of the New York State Society of CPAs, and I'm on the council for the AICPA. A fun fact about me is I'll be getting married in July. And another thing is, if I don't run unless I'm being chased. So, Orumé, you got me beat there.
Breaking news, but first of all, Lynn, you can't just throw that in there and let it slide. Congratulations. This is
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Happy to
Thank you.
hear that. Great. Let's get to meet Kecia.
Well, hello, everyone. And I'm just so glad that my two colleagues from New York State is allowing this country girl, this Southern girl, to join them on today. So I'm Kecia Williams Smith. I am currently an assistant professor here at North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University. And I lead the graduate programs. I'm the director for the Master of Accountancy program here and also the director of the Center for Accounting Diversity. So, I'm an academic, I'm a CPA, a whole lot of things, but I'm actually the only child of only children. So that is my fun fact for the day.
Nice one, Kecia, the only child of wow. You are do you know how many children there are in my family? My dad altogether had 17 children. So I've got you beat
A
right there.
little bit different than my experience. So we got some other siblings kind of mixing there, but I'm truly the only child of two only children.
Wow, yeah, that's quite a claim it. That's quite a difference. So tell me, let's start with you, Kecia. What inspired you to go into accounting? And I know it's a long journey. You don't have to give us every single step, but how did you get to where you are today, and what inspired you?
Yeah, I will start with, I said I'm the only child of only children. So my mother was training an accountant and she didn't even know it because as a child, I would help her count the Sunday school money and put it in the book so she could take it to the bank. And so those experiences, I kind of opened my eyes to accounting. I would have to give reports at the end of whenever I would go to summer camp. I would have to reconcile my accounts and tell her what I spent and what was left. All of those small experiences really opened my eyes to accounting. And somewhere in my brain, around fifth grade, I said I wanted to be a business person. And then sixth grade, I wanted to be an accountant. Who knew? I'm from Halifax, North Carolina. There were no accountants around me. But I think just being immersed in that ability to manage money, to actually reconcile, and I like, that it would balance out. And so that was really what inspired my entry into the profession. And I've had a number of wonderful experiences in the profession, ranging from being a practitioner in a large accounting firm, being an audit regulator, and now into academia. And I think where I am now is because I wanted to inspire students like professors inspired me when I was in my undergraduate journey. So that's why I'm here. And that, yes, is the redacted version of my journey.
Thank you for sharing, Kecia. Yeah, absolutely. I am still inspired by some of the professors and teachers that I have throughout my career, my journey so far. But Lynn, could you share with us, what's your story? How did you get into accounting? What inspired you?
Well, it's actually, I think it's in my blood. My grandparents who came here from Cuba My grandmother saw the neighbor making money preparing taxes, and with her accent, she told my grandfather, "You have to learn to make the papers." So he was the first tax accountant in our family. Then my father went into the field as well, and he would help my grandfather. And I think, it was like first or second grade, my father had um, a client that had a vending machine route, and every year he would bring us over a 48 pack of M&Ms. And I said, "That's what I'm gonna do. I get free M&Ms. I'm gonna free M&Ms for the rest of my life." But as I got older, I just saw what a stable profession is. Profession it was. My father was doing taxes and working as an accountant in firms. Um, we never wanted for anything, even during recessions. Our family always still got pizza on Friday nights. You know, it just it was the backbone of every business. So there was never we never wanted for anything, and he put us through private schools. And I said, you know what, I'll always have a job, and I can see how much he loves what he does. So that's the path I'm going to go.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, absolutely. Accounting is the language of money, right? I tell my students all the time, you will never want for a job, whether you're working for somebody else or you decide to go into into business for yourself. You would always have a good career, not just a regular career. You would always have a good career. So now I know, obviously, both of you did not get to where you're at today without some challenges along the way. So could you share with us some of the challenges or the obstacles you experienced, and how did you overcome them? Lynn, why don't we start with you?
Um, it not necessarily was an accounting thing, but and I was very stubborn, and probably still am, that I can do it. I can do everything. I don't need help from people. When I was younger, I got married young, and I was he left me like 2 weeks before the end of college, and I had all these exams, and there was one class, it was a religion class, that I just could not seem to give the professor what he wanted. And I said, I finally caved, and I said, you know what, it's okay to ask for help. And, I went to the professor and said, listen, I'm not giving you what I need. I need help. And I realized, I can't do everything on my own, and that's just fine. It's okay to ask people for help. So I think that was a great learning experience for me.
Absolutely. Always, always, we'll always want to be able to ask for help because we cannot do everything ourselves. Kecia, what about you, Dr. Kecia?
Yeah, I know folks are like, what do we call you? Just Keisha's fine. Like, I'm not in the classroom. It's fine. I know I have 6 letters behind my name, but it's good. We could
I
go with
know,
Keisha.
but you earned them, right? My sister also is a PhD. Sometimes I'm like, do I call her Lillian or Dr. Lillian? I'm like, we want to give respect where it's due, especially because we know you really work
Right.
hard for all those credentials.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. But I want this to be an accessible. This is a fireside chat, so let's be accessible. But yes, in the classroom, I'm Dr. Smith. Some folks say Dr. Kecia, but amongst friends, we can just say Kecia. And I think one of the challenges, even though I have these credentials behind my name, when I started at the firm, my first year, I was ranked at the bottom of my class. And I clearly was like, "Who? Wait a minute, my name is at the bottom. This cannot be true." But what I had to realize is that there was an element of truth in that, and sometimes we have to be able to take constructive feedback. Now, of course, there were probably some other factors going on in terms of the evaluation ranking, and I could have focused on that. Is it because I'm from a certain school? Is it because my package looks different than everybody else in my class? But I just kind of grabbed it by the horns and said, okay, how am I going to overcome that? And I really focused on managing and taking care of what I could take care of. I can't take care of what school I went to. I can't take care of, what I look like, but I can take care of making sure that I'm technically competent. And that was really what I focused on after that year being at the bottom of my class. I was like, all right, I got to get in this audit methodology. I have to know these standards. I have to execute at the highest level. And so that challenge of being ranked very, very low provided an impetus for me to really enjoy technical research. And who knew that years later I would be a PhD? But that was a challenge that I really looked at as an opportunity to really enhance the things that I could focus on and leave the other things to, if there were their own biases or whatever. But I really focused on what I could do. And that really was a turning point for me to know that I still could have some evolution, some learning, some pushing myself, and not being, I don't think I was ranked at the bottom after then. So I really use that as an opportunity to have some personal growth and development so that I could continue to be successful in that accounting firm.
I think that's great. I share something similar, a similar story with some of my students some of the time. When I went to college for my first degree in Nigeria, I was an okay student. I was an average student. I barely graduated. But coming back to college, going back to college after 10 years and then being a student again and paying for my tuition myself.
What's
It
the
wasn't
difference?
my parents paying for my tuition. I was paying
Right.
myself. I was an A student. I was always on the dean's list and everything else. So it's like, yeah, definitely when you find your motivation, you can overcome all of those some of those obstacles. But let's talk about the risk at in the workplace, right? So you're in the workplace, you're in a difficult situation, you have to make a decision. Do you want to challenge your boss? You want to challenge your supervisor? I remember I used to have this client. An outside when I was a staff accountant, an outside CPA who came in, and he used to refer to me as kiddo. He would come in and, hey kiddo, how's it going, kiddo? And there I was, I was like, how do you, I had to think long and hard before I confronted him on it. I'm like, do you want to take a risk and bring up an uncomfortable position or situation to your manager, to your boss, for them to address? Can you speak to some if you've had a similar experience at your jobs, or, well, wherever, and how you overcame that kind of situation? um uh, Lynn, do you want to
Yeah,
go with this?
yeah, Lynn, and then I
Sure.
can go after.
Um, for me, the biggest risk was leaving my comfort zone of a firm that I worked in for 10 years, um, where I knew I was getting consistent raises. I was doing very well, to say, um, I want to go out on my own, and to me, it was a huge leap. And I just said, you know what? There's a trampoline at the bottom. So if I jump off this cliff, I know I can bounce back. But, it was still a scary and, you know, a big chance I was taking. So I think, no risk, no reward. So I think it's important to try to, follow your risk elements in your life, because it can prove it, prove to be,
Sure.
worthwhile, very worthwhile.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
um
And
sure.
I think, with risk, we always look at that negatively. I mean, I think, there are strategic risks that we take every day, just in life. And I think being able to embrace the risk, understand the upside and the downside, and sometimes you just have to do it afraid. That's a common theme. And sometimes we hear that quote a lot. You just have to do it afraid. And so risk taking, I've had 3 pivots. I've worked as a practitioner, as a regulator, and as an academic. And I think, especially as women, since we are celebrating Women's History Month, we think about all the people that have come before us in this profession, and they had to take some calculated risks. They had to come into a profession sometimes that didn't always embrace all the women and other people of diverse backgrounds. So I think embracing the risk will, as Lynn said, no risk, no reward. We have to know that there is great opportunity and learning on the other side of the risk. And sometimes we just have to jump out there. And I've kind of taken a couple of pivots in my career, and some of them were crazy risky,
Mhm.
but I'm still standing and still smiling. So I think there is always a good reward on the other side of risk.
Exactly. We want to take those risks, take those chances. And most of the time, if you push yourself, if you just step out of our comfort zone,
Mhm.
we can we can get out get out there. So which actually brings me to the next question about what role has gender played in influencing your experiences as an accountant and as a leader. I know as a female, I know when I became a member of the New York State Society of CPAs. I was not an active member for a very long time. I always say one of the CPAs who gave me an experience, who encouraged me to step out of my comfort zone, is passed on now, the late Greg Goodman, and he put me on a task force for one of the committees and asked me to chair a comment letter that we were writing, to respond to the accounting board. And that was one of the avenues that allowed me to start to become more comfortable and to be able to hone on my leadership skills. Um, Kecia, can you share a little bit about your how how that works for you?
Yeah,
Oh,
I just think about the role models and the icons that in my little history, they're icons. And when I got to the firm, there were two women. One was a female partner. I just thought, I was like, I've never seen this before, but I will call their names and hopefully they will be appreciative. But Peggy McCormick was a partner, and Patricia Pryor, I've called her name twice today, so her ears are hopefully burning in a good way. But they were really instrumental. And a lot of times we have to see ourselves in others, and sometimes others see things in us that we don't even see as well. So for me, having those individuals in the firm that I could go to, that I was able to bounce the questions off of, they were able to nurture and guide, that helped me be very confident, even though I was a younger, you know female practitioner, kind of moving up through the ranks, having different, team dynamics, but really having those individuals to really provide some visual coaching. Like, they didn't have to say a whole lot. I just modeled my behavior after their behavior because they had been successful. And so that is how I was able to kind of hone my leadership, get comfortable being in a space and place sometimes where there were not that many women. And I am just very thankful that I had those individuals to model myself after. And now it's now my turn to try to hopefully provide some actions that others can model.
awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. I give credit where credit is due. There are lots of female leaders out there. And for the most part, I think most of the time, these female leaders, they do champion other women that are coming behind. And they always say that, there are a few, a small number of women that might pull up the ladder after them once they get up to that leadership role. But I think for the most part, right, a lot of women will always pull up a chair beside and say, "Come on in and get a seat at the table," right? So, which is really important. But Lynn, maybe you could speak to this as how do you balance your work? I know you have your own firm. You've been a business owner for how many years now? You can tell us about that. But how do you balance your role as you know being the managing director of your firm and then your other leadership responsibilities, whether with the profession at large, and also with your family life? How do you balance all of that?
I'm a big proponent of work-life balance, and it can be very difficult. Um, but I think for me, I mean, I've been on my own since 2010 and formed the firm with my partner, who is pretty much retired now, back in 2015. Um, that it's sometimes it's a struggle. I'm not going to lie, but I find at least the leadership roles in the state society has really helped my practice. So I find that, it's almost in a way an extension of my practice because it's made me a better CPA. And I have thankfully wonderful staff who's very supportive um, in the roles that I take outside the firm, not just within the firm. So it's a combination of everything. And I have a very supportive family, and especially my father, who was working in my office for years, and we worked together for 20 years doing it, side work to help each other. So it's
Yeah.
a good family atmosphere, not only necessarily in the office, but in the state society, and in with my own family.
And I love that story you said at the shared at the beginning of the session, that you said your dad said, or your mom said to someone, said to somebody else, "Oh God, you need to learn how to make the book," right? Because
Yeah.
they need to make somebody. But Kecia, maybe you could share some of your work experience. I know you've had a lot of great roles. So what are some of the strategies or the techniques that you have utilized to be really effective at your job and also to be able to maintain a good personal life?
Yeah, and two things come to mind. I steward my time, meaning time management, and I stay in my lane. And that means that there'll be a lot of opportunities. I feel like I do have a lot of jobs. I'm a professor, I run a graduate program, I run a center. I am, sometimes I'm doing things like this with my friends and speaking, and you're like, how in the world do you do that? Because I'm laser focused on my time. And that means I still use some of the strategies from when I was in public accounting. I still track my time so I can see when I'm getting off balance or off kilter. And because that's one thing we can't get more of. We can't get more time. So I am very diligent with managing my time, tracking my time still on a daily basis, looking at it overall in a week or in a day to say, wait a minute, I'm a little off in my time allocation. I need to spend more time in my research or a little bit more time in my teaching, and really seeing where I can pull out those time wasters, because sometimes, we are all guilty. We kind of play around and look up and say, oh my gosh, it's 5 o'clock. What happened to the day? So that helps me make sure that I prioritize what is important, because I'm a mom of a 60-year-old son. And so, yes, even today, he sent all these messages about his request for the upcoming prom season, and he's already working on his birthday and all that good stuff. And I'm just like, whoa. And so I need to make sure there's time that I can allocate for him, but also to stay in my lane. And that means I work on what my expertise is. Sometimes we stretch ourselves too thin doing things that somebody told us to do because they have a view that we should participate in it. Once you're very clear on your purpose and where your expertise is, then it's very helpful for you to say, well, thank you for this opportunity, but this is not really aligned with me, but I have somebody else in mind. And I think those two things help me manage all the balls that I have in the air. And even for women, because we wear so many hats, even when we walk away from the office or from the campus, we have to make sure that we are not overextended. And so I really think working in our purpose and our expertise and managing our time are two good strategies that have helped me manage all of the different roles and responsibilities that I have.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Lee, and you can jump in here as you wish. But talking about that, and previously you spoke about Kecia, you spoke about your mentors, and I know that definitely sometimes I always reach out to some of my mentors and sponsors talking about a lot of opportunities come our way, and you feel that you are overstretched. Can I take on this additional thing, or do I have enough on my plate? Folks ask me all the time, where do you get the time to do all this stuff? I don't know, but like you said, Kecia, we have to work on time management, and then we can be strategic and strategic. What we're going to say yes to, and what we're going to say no to. So time management, you say, is one of the skills that we need to have to be successful as a leader. And Lynn, what works for you? What are some of the important skills that you think are really important and necessary for anyone, for a female accountant or a male accountant? Even though this is Women's History Month, but everybody, we welcome the guys. By the way, I have to acknowledge the guys that are probably listening to this podcast, because a lot of male men did sign up to attend this live event. We do appreciate you. We cannot do all that we do without you guys. So, guys, thank you all for your support. But Lynn, go ahead, please.
I think one of the best skills to have is communication. With your staff, with your family, so that they are on the same page as you. And it's a great skill just as an accountant in general, just to learn to be personable and empathetic and understanding your clients. When I first started out, I was terrified of networking, but I had, because why would somebody want to talk to a 20-year-old when there's somebody there who's 30 years old, 40 years old, who's had more experience? And I had people in the profession that said, no, well, listen, take this as a learning experience. So you learn, I learned to communicate. I learned to see what they were doing and try to follow their lead. So, learning to be, personal with people, I think, is a very important skill set to have for this profession. And also in communicating what you're able and not able to do. Like Kecia said, you stay in your lane. You got to try to stay, do it what you're good at. And I know I'm guilty myself of saying I'm a yes person. And, in the past, sometimes it's just shot me in the foot. I can't say yes to everything. And, um, you know, sometimes that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about what's going on in the accounting industry. So, big picture, what's going on? What trends have you seen that's happening in our industry, and how do you think that some of these trends are going to affect the role of women?
I'll start.
Go ahead. No, no, go
Yeah,
ahead, Lynn.
several years ago, I took a Goldman Sachs 10,000 entrepreneur program, and I did a lot of research of women-owned accounting firms, and the number of partners. And I think it was the year was 2019, and in like I think it was in 14 years, the needle had only moved about 11% of female partners in the profession, uh, and I think in the last couple of years, that more and more they're bringing more females uh, into the profession. It's not being held against them. Well, it's less so that, listen, because that person worked part time because they decided to raise a family, and that goes with men who decided to work part time and raise a family, that they shouldn't be prohibited from moving up in the firm, because it's not necessarily the number of hours that person put in, but the quality of work that they put in. And I think it's important that um, firms have been recognizing that and are continuing to recognize that it's not just that I work 70 hours a week and somebody else worked 35 because they raised a family. If they have the knowledge base, they should be promoted. And I think we're seeing more and more of that. And I hope to see more and more of that.
Yeah, and just to kind of follow up with that, when we look at the trends that come out of campuses, it's about equal, where we have female and male. If we're talking about those categorizations for this discussion, coming out of college about the same rate in the profession, but it's the long-term trajectory that Lynn is talking about in terms of getting to that partner level. But what I am hopeful and optimistic about is that the pandemic kind of shook up everything that we knew about how we work. And so now I believe there are more opportunities for hybrid work. We can work in different places. We're seeing firms, maybe component, doing some of the audit, that certain pieces of the audit can be set aside and people can kind of develop a deep expertise in that versus having to work on everything. Learning, now that firms are trying to think about how do they do their delivery of services in a more efficient way, there is now opening up opportunity for people to work differently. And that is what I'm excited about. And then in terms of the technical aspects and what is happening in different services, we know we can talk about ESG all the time, and that is one area that I think is ripe for opportunity, because it is looking at not only environmental, that's probably what we hear a lot about, but the social and the governance. And there is a different level of assurance that's needed, a different level, possibly attestation services. So I think just in terms of if we want to say, oh my goodness, accounting is, falling apart, we don't have people, I think we need to kind of transition and say, where are those opportunities? And are we making sure that everybody that should be in the profession is in the profession? Because there is plenty of opportunity and work to be done, because on the needle, like Lynn is saying, in terms of whether they're women, partners, where I look at, African American CPAs, those needles unfortunately haven't been moving that much over the years. And so it is our responsibility to make sure that we are talking about the benefits of the profession, the different ways that we can work in the profession, and the interesting things that we're doing in the profession. Those are trends that I like to see, and I'm hopeful and excited about.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Absolutely, I agree. And we did speak about those opportunities and then mentorship, but with some of this, the new work environment that we have and the opportunities that are out there for women, it also involves sponsorship, right? You need to have a great sponsor, someone who has your back. Can you I know I have a lot of different sponsors and they've all been really, really instrumental in my success so far, but could you share from your personal experience, if you rely on sponsors, if you call on sponsors, and what you do for folks around you, for women around you, how you sponsor them, how you show up for them?
Yeah, and I think, I've done a workshop for the Accounting Scholars Leadership Workshop for the AICP for a couple of years on mentors and sponsors, because it's a difference. And, mentors are kind of, you're, I would almost say, kind of a little bit passive because they're listening. But sponsors are somebody that you want to speak your name in a room when you're not there. They're really exercising their social capital to invest in your success. And I like what you just said, Orumé. You have a lot of sponsors. And I think this is the challenge sometimes. People want to find this magical mentor or this magical sponsor that can do everything. And voila, you're going to, turn into this very seasoned professional overnight just by one conversation. It doesn't work like that. You really have to think about strategically what do you need from the individual, because some individuals are just well suited to be your mentor. There are other individuals that are better suited to be your sponsor because they're in a position of influence, whether within your company or your firm or your environment, that can speak your name and associate you with a different opportunity. So I think what we first need to do is make sure we're clear on what a mentor does for us and what a sponsor does for us, and then build a complement of those individuals. It's not just one, but build a board. We've heard this, build a board of directors or build a board of, mentors and sponsors. I just like, it's my village, my people that understand my skill set. And the mentors are the ones that, like I mentioned earlier, the Patricia Prize and the Peggy McCormicks, those are the folks I can go to and just kind of say, I need some help. But the sponsor is someone that sees something in me that can meet a need for another organization, and they're speaking my name in that room in order for me to continue to succeed. And that's the part that I think as women, that's the part that we need. The Catalyst Report several years ago talked about that. We have plenty of mentors. Like, again, I could call them off the top of my head, but the sponsorship that, getting to the next level, moving into different circles, moving into leadership, that's where the sponsorship is necessary and critical. And that is what something that probably as women, we probably need to focus a little bit more on.
I couldn't agree more. I know, for myself, I said, I don't think I ever had a mentor or a sponsor, where I called them that. But I think in looking back and stuff, and even now, I mean, my history with the society, um, these other CPAs have become people I can go to and I can call on and ask for help. Partners that I used to work with, in another firm, they refer to me clients. I mean, they're sponsoring me because they believed in the work that I did for them there, and they know their firm can't handle it, so that they're praising my work and bringing in business for me, and because they respect me and like what I'm doing. But I definitely think looking for more sponsorship is definitely something that we should be promoting for to doing for other women, as well as looking for it ourselves. I know for me, I try to be so independent, and uh, again, there's people out there that know and can help you. So it's
Yeah,
again that reaching out for help that sometimes it's hard to do.
absolutely. So let me ask you. So we just celebrated. What we know this month is Women's History Month, and a couple days ago we celebrated International Women's Day, and the theme for that day was embrace equity, right? So it's not about equality; it's about equity, right? So we think of DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. So how do you come to this space? How do you promote diversity, equity in the accounting profession? I know, Lynn, on your LinkedIn page, I saw you have your banner. I thought your banner was very interesting because I think, I don't know if you could speak to that, but I thought it was a very diverse background. It showed a lot. So maybe you could share with us, Lynn, you go first, and then Kecia, you can share with us how you promote what you're doing and how others can help promote women, as well as diversity, equity really important, and inclusion in the accounting profession.
Yes, I'm very, and I start with people at a young age. I go back to my high school for career night, but I'm also very involved with our co-op program, which is the career opportunities in the accounting profession, and where we promote women and minorities to come in and to learn more about the accounting profession. And I go in and I speak to them. I try to get students interested, high school students interested into the profession. um, you know in looking at um, you know, resumes, I try not to look at a name. I want to see what their work is, so I'm getting a diverse group of people because of their background and not because of, that of what my thought may be just based on a name, so that
Mhm.
there's definitely a diversity in the office. And my grandparents were given an opportunity when they came here, um, and I feel the same, that need to give to other people the same opportunities. So
Right. Keisha?
Yeah, for me, it's full circle because I am now teaching at the undergraduate institution that I attended. And so for me, it is trying to pay it forward. And so in some of the work, it is with the Center for Accounting Diversity. Of course, we're focused on one portion of diversity. But I just had a conversation with a bright, brilliant young woman that, I'm just excited for her because then once she gets into profession, I can retire. But when it is for me and the work that we do at the Center for Accounting Diversity, it really is pulling down the barriers. I mean, let's just be clear about our profession. It is a profession. There are things that we have to do to enter the profession, but sometimes those things, even though well intended, can be barriers. So we're trying to remove the barriers around access to the profession by increasing awareness, doing programmatic initiatives with two-year college students, community college students, which sometimes in higher ed we overlook, but they are a fantastic population that are interested. I like what Lynn said about high school outreach, making sure there's funding available for students that want to get graduate education, making sure that faculty members that might be from HBCUs or minority serving institutions have the research ability, because once the faculty members are upskilled, then they then transfer that to their students in the classroom. So for me, embracing equity is really thinking critically and outside of the box of some of the things that we've done for years. I mean, we have done some initiatives in the profession, and we keep doing them, and then we throw up our hands and say, well, why aren't things happening? Well, this is a different generation. We need to really make sure we are articulating the value of accounting to society and making sure, and I'm gonna put my audit professor hat on, when we talk about the completeness assertion, making sure that everybody that should be in the profession is in the profession. And that is with outreach, with removal of barriers, and with encouraging them that there's a place for them in this profession. And so for young women looking at this, or women in the profession looking at this, they should see themselves in some of our stories and say, I'm excited, and we will continue to move forward and matriculate in the accounting profession.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And Lee, let me come to you with the next question. If you can give a more specific example of how your gender has influenced your experience so far as an accountant and now as a leader.
I had, there was, I never really thought there was a female issue, and I think, I think it was Kecia or Orumé brought up before that said, you look to somebody who's successful, whether it was a man or a woman, and say that's what I want to emulate because I want to be successful in my career. But I know as a time when I was uh, running to become president of the Nassau County chapter of CPAs, and I was going to only be the third female president. And starting to move up the ranks, I was asked the question, um, do you think you can handle it as a solo practitioner? And I said, well, that's odd. So I asked the female president that was before me, um, were you asked this question? And she said yes. And then I asked the male solo practitioners that were before me, were you asked that question? And they said no. So it was truly somebody who had a gender issue with me becoming a president and not thinking I could handle it. Um, so for me, that made me want to give 110%. And then also make the board predominantly women. So I think it was one of the first predominantly women female boards for the Nassau County chapter. Both, and encouraging younger people to get involved, and, specifically women, because it was a very male dominated area. Like I said, I was only the third one in 63 years. So
Yeah, yeah, very, very good. Thanks for sharing that. Definitely, I have been in lots of different situations like that where sometimes they will challenge you on that, and it's mind-boggling that in today's day and age, folks still have such thoughts. Um, but let me come back to you, Kecia. And so you're in the classroom. We know that you're doing great work out there, touching lives and educating students. So for either for a student or for a young staff member who's looking to um, be able to get onto that leadership path, what would you say? What are some of the skills, and in addition to having the core technical knowledge, what else should they be honing? What else should they be bringing to the table that can get them on the right path?
Yeah, and I think Lynn mentioned something earlier about communication, being able to communicate well, orally and written. I think sometimes students are surprised at the level of writing that happens in the accounting profession. If you think about it, you will start, if you're in an audit sense, you'll have an engagement letter, and then you'll eventually get to an audit report, but you might have a technical memo that you have to write. You might have to write a management letter about some value add things that you can add. You're during an audit, because you can tell I'm an auditor, you're writing tick marks. And so I think communication is key, oral or written. But also I think sometimes we overlook mastering the small things, because there are a lot of instances where you might be given small tasks and you're just like, why do I have to do this? But if you do those small things well, that will you start to create a kind of a narrative around you that you work really hard, they got this task and they approach it with enthusiasm. So making sure that you do all things well, having effective communication skills, of course the technical competence, and being resilient. Sometimes we say resilience or grit or whatever. The environment, the profession is changing. What it looked like when I came in is very different than the students that I educate now. So being able to be responsive to change, or being able to be stepping out and taking some risk, those things are really what help you. The communication, the risk taking, the being able to come back from adversity and challenge, managing the small things well, and really having good character. This is why the profession was always an attraction for me, because it operated with integrity and you have good character and people are trusting you as an advisor. And so to continue to hone your character, I think also carries you very, very far and makes you well suited for those leadership roles in the profession.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for saying that. Lee, let me come back to you. So those are great skills to have, right? That I can set an individual up for success. Now, what about the folks who are already in the industry? They're already at work. They're already, let's say, they're in middle management or something, or staff, senior staff. And but they feel that they're stuck. They're not getting to the next level, right? We know that when a lot of the times when I don't have the statistics, but I think when a lot of folks that graduate from accounting, it's usually about 50-50 men and women, right? But then you see the trajectory go up for men that are really going all the way up to partner level and everything else to the C-suite, and then women get stuck somewhere in the middle. Can you speak to that? What would you do? You have any advice to women who feel that they're stuck in their careers, they're not making any more progress?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think always networking with people is a great way to see what's, going on in other firms and other professions, and sit down and have a conversation with your boss and say, listen, I've been, giving my 110%, or I've been working on this. I'm not understanding why I am not moving forward. What is it that you're expecting of me that I'm not providing, or, that I could work better at so I can move up. I enjoy this company and this is where I need to be. But, I think it's building relationships with your partners and your other staff members. You're working together so that, you're building each other up and bringing, everyone up to um, get that raise. And you know what, maybe then if it's not that place, you build that network of people and that networking concept that, what, you'll find it maybe in another firm. So I think, it's constantly building relationships with people. I mean, even your own clients that will, assist you in moving forward.
And the other thing I would add to that, because one of the things that we've heard is upskilling. The environment is changing. So clearly I'm an educator and I come from an educator family. So I am always thinking about ways that I can gain a new skill or learn something different. And that is how you keep yourself fresh and how you bring value that others may not bring, and shows that you are actively working to increase your ability to deliver your service or to be in whatever aspect of the accounting. So I think there are so many different ways that we can upskill. Doing this, viewing this right now is an opportunity for somebody to learn something new. There are things like LinkedIn Learning, since we're on the LinkedIn platform, LinkedIn Learning, micro kind of learning opportunities. The state societies, you all do fantastic work in educating professionals. So whenever you feel stuck, maybe step back and say, all right, is there something else I need to learn? Or is there a new skill I need to add on? Or is there a new concept or topic that I need to educate myself on so that I'm conversant in this wildly changing environment? And I think sometimes when you learn something new, you do something different. And that's another way to kind of get yourself unstuck from where you are.
Yeah, I love that. And if you feel, I would add to that, that if you feel that you have, I mean, we always learning, right? So that's why we're in this career that we are. You can never say you know it all. We're in a continuous learning profession, so we will always be learning. But I would add to that. I would say know your value, right? I
Mhm.
love Miss Mika Bizinski. She has this platform, and she champions this thing, and holds a conference every year. Know your value. You have to know your value. Know what you're worth. Know what it is that you know, and where you should be. And sometimes we just have to step out of that comfort zone and push for it. So you have to sometimes take a chance, and don't just wait for it to come to you. You're waiting for them to ask you to the table. Please, 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 pull
Pull
up
up a
that chair.
chair. Yes.
Right, that's what people say, pull up that chair. But
Mhm.
Lynn, take it away. Tell us about, I know you have a financial literacy program. Can you share some details about that? How does that work? What do you do there?
I'm been working again with the society and with our legislators and assembly people. I think it's something our school systems are lacking, is financial literacy. I don't think it needs to just start in college. I think it needs to start as young as, even kindergarten. They get it, parents teaching them with, you want to, you, you want to make some money, you got to do a chore, and you find out, then you learn how to save. Uh, Students need to know that, uh, one, it's one way to bring people into the accounting profession and help build that pipeline. But I think, you know, accounting is the backbone of every business, no matter what business you go to. You want to start you're an entrepreneur, you want to start your own company, you need to have that financial literacy. You need to know what a balance sheet and a profit and loss statement look like. But I really think that these students, especially students who are off to college, uh, their parents aren't even educated enough that they're taking out these student loans that, on the back end, they're going to be paying a lot of money for a really long time. And if they educated on the financial literacy of it, and what this is really going to cost them, maybe we won't have this problem of that student loan debt that we do. I have a parent, clients who are professors at very good schools, and they want their child to have an experience, and they send them off to a school that's going to cost them $70,000 a year when they can go to school for free in their school, because they want their child to have an experience. They're looking only maybe at the short term and not the student loan debt that these kids are going to have afterwards, because that's a terrible experience to have to have. So, we need to educate not only the students, but the parents as well when it comes to financial literacy. I just don't think there's enough of that. So we're really pushing to try to get that into the education system, at least at junior high and high school level, and then hopefully even down to grammar school levels.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing that. I'm talking about college. Um, one of the things that I do, I'm always as inspired. I teach as well. I teach at the College of Staten Island, the business school. And breaking news, I actually just got another role. I'm going to be a graduate advisor at another college, Hunter College.
Okay.
So Inspire. I'm going to be very busy. But Kecia, Dr. Smith, could you please share with us? I always love when I see women, business women or moms in my classroom, and I know what they're going through, and they're dedicated enough to come into the classroom. So how do you inspire these women? Women, I know you also inspire men, but specifically now we're speaking to women. How do you inspire them and set them off on their path to success?
Yeah, and I think it's the storytelling. It is articulating that, yeah, at one point I was at the bottom of my class and you can do it. And what I had to navigate through and taking the CPA exam and even going into a large firm, what that looked like. And so for me, it is being present and dispelling some of the myths about the profession and helping them understand they can do it. I had a fantastic conversation with a graduate student at Jackson State University this week, and she's going through taking the CPA exam. And her comment was really about, being able to see people like her in the profession and championing her to make sure that she is doing what she needs to do to pass the exam. And so my role, I feel at this point in my career, that's why I said, I have these letters behind my name. That's great and all. But right now I am going back to what I call the purest form of myself, because when I was an undergrad student, I really was looking at the diversity issue and didn't even know that I was looking at diversity issue when I wrote a paper about the African-American presence in the profession. But more broadly, when we talk about women's issues, when I was at a firm, we were really on the forefront of having a women's initiative to really make sure that we were doing enough to coach and counsel women. And so for me, in my role as a professor, it is my duty when I'm in front of that classroom to inspire and to educate and to emulate for them what it looks like to be a fully functioning, integral part of the profession. And that's really what I am excited about. I have education running through my DNA. And so that is something that I model for my students, whether I'm a faculty advisor for an organization, whether I'm running a grad program, and whatever instance, it is making sure that the women know they are absolutely capable, they can do it. Don't let anything kind of, concern you in terms of myths and, oh, it's a challenge. Yeah, it's a rigorous profession, but it is a rewarding profession. So that is what I feel my duty is when I stand in front of the classroom.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So we actually do have one question from the audience. We'll come back to this, but let me just throw it out there. We're going to wrap up because we've got about 8 minutes left to go for our time here, and I want to do some rapid fire questions. But this audience member wanted to know, what we thought about the foray of private equity into our industry. As the acquisition, getting into the attest and non-attest services. I don't have any thoughts on that. I don't know if either one of you have any thoughts on that. But I want to do a quick rapid fire on one of the, like some of you might know, I used to be an actor, and I used to love watching interviews on actors and actresses. And there's this interviewer, he's passed on now. His name is James Limpton. And he used to have 10 questions that he used to ask. So I'm not going to ask his specific 10 questions, but I have a couple of questions I would just like to hear from each one of you. And I'll play in as well. What is your favorite word? Lynn, go first.
Motivate.
Motivate. Ooh, I love that. That's a good one. Kecia?
I couldn't come up with, I have like two: fantastic and no. No.
Interesting. And my favorite word, I think, is yes, because I will say yes first and then iron out the details later. I can come back and say no afterwards. But if you say no immediately, you shut that door. If I say yes, I leave the opportunity open, and then I can iron out the details later. That's what. So that's my. But thanks for sharing that. What is your least favorite word?
Can't.
Yeah, that was
Can't?
mine. Can't.
Okay, yeah, I'll go with that. I don't have anything against that. Let's talk. Let's move on. The last movie. What was the last movie that you saw, Kecia? You have to think about that one.
Because I'm a reader more than a movie person. I think it was Black Panther 2. That was a long time ago. Like, yeah, that sounds about right.
Right.
I'm trying to go see Creed. but I
Okay.
haven't gotten it yet.
Yeah, I'll try and see that one as well. Lynn?
I'm not really a big movie watcher. I'm more of a binge watcher of,
Sure.
series on TV,
Yeah.
even if they're old ones. But I think the last one, there was two, and I'm not sure which order I saw them in, was Marry Me with Jennifer Lopez and Top Gun Maverick. So
Okay.
those are my
Oh,
last
good.
two.
Well, guys, I cannot remember the last movie I saw. I think the last movie I actually saw at the movie theater was In the Heights, which was over a year ago, I think it was. So
That
yeah,
is right.
so this is not to say that all accountants and CPAs don't go to the movies, guys. Anyone listening out there, we do. It's just that right now everyone's busy, so we
Right.
Yeah.
probably have not time to go out to the movies. But let's talk about books. What was the last book that you read?
Yeah, damn, that's my jam right there. You talking about books? All right, let's get ready. I finished a book last night. We called "Before I Let Go" by Kennedy Ryan. But right before that, I read a book about it's called "Be." By Her Own Design about Ann Lowe. So if you don't know about Ann Lowe, fashion designer, Google her. But those are the two books that I've recently read in the last week.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks for that. I will Google them and go check it out. Lynn?
I can't say that I'm really a reader, but I am an Audible person. So I'm
Okay.
driving in the car, and I think I got turned off to reading when they made me do book reports in third grade,
Oh
and I
man, that
used
was
to
I
love
was
to read.
excited. Like I was on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, I like the mystery books, but until they said this is the one you have to do and this is the one you have to read, I was like, no. But I've recently was listening to "Bring Yourself" by Maury Thorapar. If I say it incorrectly, I apologize. She's a professor at Wharton. She does teaches negotiations and how to be. Uh, that part of it is being empathetic and not just trying to understand the other side. You don't have to be stone cold. You one side doesn't have to win, the other side has to lose in order for this to be a good negotiation. And I found her, when the short time I saw her at Goldman Sachs, she was excellent, and I got her book right away when it came out. And for the accountants out there, especially those who are deciding whether or not they should decide to go out on their own and start their own practice, um, the myth for accountants, which is the entrepreneurial myth. It kind of starts out that you find out you're working for a lunatic, and then you're realizing you're the lunatic you're working for sometimes when
I
so,
love that.
yes. So it's about learning to kind of work on your business, not necessarily in your business.
I love that. So I'm going to skip myself because we're running out of time because I want to get to our last question and then get any final thoughts from each one of you. So if you were to go into any other profession other than accountancy or being in education, what would that profession be, Kecia?
Cosmetology.
Ah, awesome. Okay.
Yeah, so doing hair and all that good stuff relaxes me. So cosmetology followed closely behind by being a librarian.
Oh, good one. Still giving
Great.
back. Still doing for others. I love it.
Yeah.
Lynn.
Um, you know, recently, and up until recently, I couldn't think of myself doing anything, but working within the society, being a lobbyist.
Hmm.
Ah,
I
interesting.
said,
Okay.
you get to meet all these people, get to talk to them, get to know them, helping people get together and work things out, and for the best good of
Yeah.
their constituents and the different various groups out there. So I thought, so
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I speak to a lot of CPAs and accountants, and sometimes I see them. They're very good at what they do. Sometimes I say, "You make a good politician." They will say, "No, that's not an area I want to go into." It's like, leave me out of politics. So while we wrap up in the last 2 minutes that we have, any final thoughts, words of advice that you would like to share with either students, young career folks, or seasoned career folks on how we can more celebrate women, help women, elevate women to accomplish all they want to in life. Keisha, you go first.
Yeah, I would say see women. Sometimes it feels like people don't really see and value the contributions of women, whether in whatever space and place they are. So I would say see women and make sure that you see the totality of what they can bring, because they are forced to be reckoned with when they're properly seen.
Thank you. Lynn?
I think it's important that women work together to help each other. Again, it goes back to that asking for help. Or I've seen women they think it's a competition against each other, where they were really working together. Their careers would both flourish, as opposed to trying to think they're going to outbeat the other one. And I would tell young kids, go into accounting, because no matter what you do and what you decide, you want to be an IT person, and there's stuff knowing accounting still will help you. So I think it's a great field. It's done well by me. So
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And I want to thank both of you, Dr. Kecia Williams-Smith and Lynn Fuentes. Thank you both for joining me today. And let's go out there, keep doing what you're doing, and continued success to everyone. See you next time. Cheers,
Thank
everyone.
you so much.
thank you so much, Orumé.
It was a
Bye.
pleasure.